This is the story Fatherland, and the story is about these two families, how they are together in some way. There was this first family, Mrs. Lai and Mr. Lai, and they got a child called Fong, and later in the story called Vivian, as Marcus will explain later. And after this, the dad, Mr. Lai, was this was in the Cold War, so Mr. Lai was against the communism. So after the communism won the war, you can say, he got into a labor camp. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lai and Fong moved to USA to get a new life. And in this period, that goes about 27 years. And in this period, Mr. Fong gets a new family, a new wife, and he gets a new child. He calls after the first Fong, also called, it's Fong number 2, and that's why in the story we call Vivian, the first one. And 27 years later, Mr. Lai gets a letter from USA about that Vivian is going on a vacation, and about the things that she's accomplished, about her. She's a doctor, and Mrs. Lai has a clinic, and all these good things about them. And after this, she lands in Vietnam, where the family is originally from. And at that time, we are getting into Mr. Lai is opening from her for her, as he hasn't done before with Fong, number 2 Fong. And we sees the love he has for Vivian, and it comes they go some restaurants, and we got to see his job and experience all these things that Fong never had experienced before. But because Vivian is here, we get to see in a different perspective from Mr. Lai. And as we think the story is going well and she's wealthy, Vivian, there comes a time where Vivian and Fong has a good relationship, because in the start it was Fong was pretty jealous of what Vivian had. So Vivian then tells, and we also got to know at that point, that Vivian isn't that rich. She is a accountant and is pretty poor. And Mrs. Lai doesn't own a clinic but works at a clinic, and we see that the story is a lie. And also that Vivian also only tells Thong about it. So Mr. Lai doesn't get to know about it, and then she flies home. And at that point, Thong then burns a picture of Vivian in this amusement park. And then it's a stop to the story, and we see it ends where it began in some way.
It's time for the characters. Well, one of the characters is Mr. Lai, the father of Vivian and Fong. He's a very strict guy. He puts a lot of rules in Fong's life, and but he seems to be cuddling up for his own daughter, Vivian, when she comes to Vietnam. Thereby his character changes and he develops. On to Vivian. Vivian seems to be a really positive woman. She's accomplished a lot of things in her life and she's happy. But in truth, she's not. She lives a poor life in America. And she lies about what she really is. She's only an accountant for a large business. She evolves from lying to everyone to telling the truth to Fong. Thereby, once again, a lot like Mr. Lai, her character develops. Last but not least, we have Fong, the third main character, or actually the real main character in the story. It's told from her perspective. Fong has grown up with a lot of rules, so suddenly changing, her life is slowly changing with Vivian's around, doing stuff she's not usually doing with her father. She seems to have a very dreaming personality of dreaming, because she dreams about leaving Vietnam, and she wants to have a different future than what she's meant to have because of her family's roots and traditions in her country. She doesn't like much of her father of not giving the love. She seems to seems to be a little bit cold against some people, especially Vivian. No, on to what's good about the story. The story has a lot of great things, especially its perspective and story. First, we know that we see it from Fong's perspective, though it's not an all-knowing perspective. It's not like Fong is telling the story like it already happened. We're following what's happening, and that makes it an interesting story that we do not know everything. As earlier said in the characters topic, there is we talk a lot about how we don't know that Vivian is really not a doctor, and though we do not know that, and thereby we realize it at the same time that the characters realize it. Thereby, it's a shocking revelation that we get to know about.
My opinion about the story is it's very long drawn. There's so little information in the story itself that we could have gotten it on like 1 or 2 pages, which would have been a lot more enjoyable for me as the reader, because I honestly found the story very boring. To be honest, the plot twist was kind of boring because she kind of overreacted just because her sister lied to her. Yes, it can be tragic that someone you look up to lie to you, but isn't it still a bit over dramatic to just go and burn a picture? Like, what does that picture mean to you? Yeah, you know she lied, but what does it? Think about what it means to her father. Her father probably found the picture very precious, because he hasn't seen her in 23 years. He finally gets a picture, and Fong just goes ahead and burns it.
Now we have talked about the good things in the story, and also had a short review of what we actually think that's not that good about the story. And when we combine these two elements, we think that it's actually an okay story, and the storyline is good. That we don't get it from start to finish. That there's also these we get this 27 years in the beginning in the actual story about the timeline, but when we write it, we get it in a different order. So the way that it's written, it's a good element of the story. And Marcus, do you want to say something about it as well?
Well, it's true that the story is really interesting. It has a lot of interesting perspective. Story, though, I think it has been made before sometimes, but I still found it interesting. And I did, for once in the story that we were forced to read, I did actually the ending a little bit, and I was interested in the story.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, and that was all for today.